Hello, and welcome to our living room. My name is Marilyn Harper.
And I'm Joy Roby.
And we are going to Israel. And we would just like to welcome you to our living room and show you a few of our family slides, if that's all right, and give you
I think everybody's just signed off, Marilyn.
Well, it will be worth it. Trust me. Why are we doing this again?
Well, we have a trip coming up to Israel, and we decided that not everyone will always get to go with us. And we love the fact that we've had such amazing experiences in Israel that we just wanted to share it with you. And so we started talking about how, remember when you were kids and you'd get out the slides and you'd walk through somebody's travels and how fun it was? What we'd like to do is we titled this 3 Things We Learned from Yeshua while Walking the Holy Land. But it's funny because as we started putting together our notes on what we wanted to share with you, we realized there was way more than 3
Way
things.
more than 3
Oh my gosh,
things.
it was spectacular. And so we just thought that if you are ever thinking about going to the Holy Land, or if you've seen that we're going to the Holy Land and you'd like to join us, but you had questions or concerns, or if maybe you know you're never going to go to the Holy Land, but you'd like to hear about what it's like to walk with Master Yeshua in the Holy Land, then Marilyn will tell you now why. Why?
Oh. See, it's just like that. Why?
Well, the reason why I did that is because she's not Master Yeshua,
No.
but she channels a council and
Adironnda. And if you're not familiar with our work, I am a channel for Adironnda and the Council of Light. And in 2014, I went to Israel by myself and was brought in by a group of Israelis. And it was amazingly spectacular. And Master Yeshua came in the first time, really, for any length of time, that trip. And he has always been on the council, but he's only spoken a few times, just for a few minutes, independently of the rest of the council.
and this was in
2014.
Okay, just to
That
give
was-
you some scope on
Right.
this.
That was my first trip
Yeah.
into Israel. And he came through and did a 45-minute transmission.
for
and-
Israelis.
For Israelis.
Yes.
Right. And there was a bus
Jewish Israelis.
Jewish Israelis. There was a busload of Christians that got out of the bus just at that time and listened to the entire transmission. It was so amazing. And he started off by saying, I just want to let you know that my last name is not Christ. And I'm known as Yeshua ben Joseph of Nazareth. And so that's why we call him Master Yeshua.
And then we went back and we went together in 2015 with Lee Carroll and Elon.
And then we took our own trip.
Then we took our own trip in 2017.
And we have been guided to go again. And according to Master Yeshua, this trip this year is a peace trip. That it's not nearly as dangerous as you might think in Israel. It is a beautiful place that is filled with peaceful, cohesive, benevolent energy. And we just want to share a few of our stories and what we learned from Master Yeshua when we've been there in the past. I hope that's okay.
Or maybe that's why Mother Mary has been coming through so much, because it is a peace trip.
Oh, well,
I
that
hadn't
makes
thought
sense.
about that, but yeah, that does make sense, doesn't it?
Yes.
And just to give you some idea of what we're talking about, Mother Mary coming through, we've noticed like in the last year actually, with the Channelers Academy and on certain retreats, we had Mother Mary come through in group channeling, which doesn't always happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what happened with Yeshua when Yeshua first started coming through, right?
Exactly. So can we share the pictures now?
Would you like to see some of our slides from the show and hear the story?
I would love that. So we'll just move to the slides. And this is us. This is Adironnda and Company with Marilyn and Joy. And obviously, this is us. I'm the one on the, well, I don't know which side you're on. I'm the one with the sunglasses. Oh, no, that doesn't work either.
I've got the white jacket on.
And I've got the white hair. So this is an overlook of Jerusalem. This is taken from the Mount of Olives, and what you're seeing there is the gold dome, the dome that is on top of, it's a Muslim dome, on top of the Wailing Wall. The structure underneath of that is the Wailing Wall, or the Western Wall as you might know it.
And you know what's interesting to me about this picture, Marilyn, was, I'm probably going to look terribly naive in this statement. But one of the things that surprised me so much when we went to Israel was how small it was.
Yeah.
Like Israel has a prominent place in the news. You often hear about it. But as we went over the course of 2 weeks, I believe, as we went from location to location that I had heard about, in Sunday school, mostly, as a child, you hear these stories and you think, the Sea of Galilee is the sea, like the Pacific Ocean. You don't realize that it's more like a lake. And the Mount of Olives, you think, is like so far away from the dome,
right?
And yet here we are looking right at it.
Right at it. And the part underneath, it goes down. I mean, we've gone down, there's catacombs and temples built on top of temples, on top of temples. And we've gone down all the way to the one of the most recent temples that they've discovered is the Temple of Solomon, which was 3,000 years old. And we go down and we take a little gander inside of the Western Wall. It is absolutely spectacular. This is one of the things that I learned. You can see this. I'm taking a picture, but the place that I want you to think about is this is overlooking the city of Jerusalem. And the first time we were there in 2015, we had a tour guide. There was, 6 motor coaches of people there with us. And our tour guide had never seen channeling. So this is on the rooftop of the building that was supposedly where they had the Last Supper. And our tour guide, Herzl, said that he'd never seen channeling. And so as we were walking up to the rooftop, he said, "Could you channel a message for us while we're on the rooftop?"
And if you're watching this and you happen to have the photograph of what Marilyn's about to describe happened, please send it to us.
Please do. Please do. Because we can't find it anywhere. And it was pretty spectacular. We had started channeling on the rooftop. And on that rooftop, Yeshua came through immediately, of course, and said, well, this isn't the actual place where they had the Last Supper. It has been redone and remodeled and rebuilt because it was destroyed. The original building was destroyed. And we found out later that that was true. And then, as soon as Yeshua finished his transmission, the bells across the city of Jerusalem started ringing. The fact that it was 5 o'clock was just really good timing. And it had been cloudy all through that day. And the clouds parted just as we finished the transmission, and they were in the shape of a dove, and they had the God fingers of light, the sunlight coming through. It was spectacular.
I think there were like 30 of us
Yeah.
up there on the rooftop, and you could have heard a pin drop. I mean, once the bells were done chiming, everybody was just, tears were rolling down people's faces, and we were all just standing there going, what just happened? That was so amazing.
It was amazing. So if anybody has that picture of that dove with the God fingers coming through it, send it to us, please. Because that was one of the things that I learned that I mean, I know that Yeshua was on the council, and I knew that he would be a part of this trip, but I didn't realize that our messages were so totally and completely sanctioned really by God. And that was definite proof of that.
Well, and one of the things I learned was to hang on to the back of Marilyn's collar, because it was Yeshua talking in her ear the whole time. And if you don't know this already, Marilyn is a trans channel. So, even though the lights are on, she's not home when the channel comes through. She doesn't know what's happening. And I learned that often Yeshua would say to her, well, that's a story, but that's not 100% accurate. And what happened was over here. And so she would start walking away to, the place that Yeshua was talking about.
Right. It's really pretty interesting to have a constant conversation in your ear with Master Yeshua's voice. Now, this is a wonderful picture that I love because it is someplace that most tourists do not go to, and that's in the catacombs under the city. There's a whole section of ancient, pre-Jesus time, 2,000 years old, 3,000 years old, 4,000 years old structures underneath the city, and we got to go into some of them.
And, one of the things that I learned, because this was our first international trip, was that temples are built on top of temples, built on top of temples. Now, we saw this in Peru and in Egypt as well. But what happens is a temple gets built, and then another religion will come along and build their place of worship on top of it. And then the dirt comes in and the winds blow. And, so in Israel, what was interesting was we saw, and I'm going by memory, I think it was like 3 different layers of temples underneath the dome. Was that where we were?
It was underneath the dome and underneath the western wall.
Yeah. So we saw 3 layers, and our guide told us they don't even know for sure how many more layers could potentially be beneath the one that we were walking at. I also had one of my first and most amazing experiences, like a metaphysical experience. And that was, we're walking along in this tunnel, basically, 3 temples down underneath the city. And it was a little bit hot, and we were tired, and I put my hand against the wall to lean back. And all of a sudden, it was like I was shifted to Roman times, and chariots were flying by, and I pulled my hand back like that. And Marilyn looked at me and she goes, "What's wrong?" And I went like that just to see if it happened again. I pulled it back and I said, "Oh my God, I just had this experience of Roman chariots, flying past me on this cobblestone road." And Adironnda has explained to us many times that what happens when you get called to go to a place like Israel or, Machu Picchu or any of these what we call sacred spots is that you're picking up an aspect of yourself. You probably had a lifetime there, and an aspect or a piece of your soul is still there. And when you go, it's like you get I'll call it instant remembrance.
Yeah, it's so fascinating when you have that instant recognition, because it's not like a little drifted memory coming in and out. It's like right there, and there's no questioning it. It is there, and that's what happened with Joy. That's why I took their picture there. The picture that you're looking at now is called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and it is an amazing structure. And according to their belief, inside of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, I mean, it's quite ornate. I've got videos of priests coming in and singing, and it's packed with people, because the theory is that is where the stone that they oiled Yeshua's body on before they put him into the tomb, and this structure is over the tomb where he was indeed buried. And there were packs of people in there,
and smoke too.
And smoke,
yeah.
And there was incense and all kinds of this. I mean, this was not a real picture of it, because we could not see it because there were so many people. However,
well, this is a stock photo of
right.
It is a real photo of it.
It is a real photo, but it is a stock photo.
Yeah.
But then, after we realized, but we knew that we were kind of on holy ground, because in this Church of the Holy Sepulchre, there's a multitude of other religions. You can go up the stairs, this tiny stairway, and see other religious artifacts there. And then you can go down the stairs where there were no other tourists. And this was when I had one of my realizations, is we just kept walking down the stairs and down the stairs. And I don't know where we were, except we were under the building itself. And we went into this, what looked like a cave. Now, they did have, at some point, they put a glass structure up in front of the cave walls. Because when I walked into this area, it's like every inch of my body started to tingle, and I knew we had been there before. I knew it. And just our group was the only group that was there. And so, of course, we had a transmission from Master Yeshua, and this was where the disciples went. Before Yeshua was buried, and this could have been the area where he was buried. I want to get that straight in this trip to Israel, but whatever this room was, this cave-like room, it was quite holy, and it is really a powerful structure.
And it's so interesting too, Marilyn, because when you go into these places, energetically, you don't always know what happened, but you can feel that something very powerful took place, and in this case, completely shifted mankind.
And I'm just hearing that this is not where I was buried.
Oh.
This is where the disciples and us would go to hide from the Romans when we needed to. And so that's what this is.
Interesting.
Yeah. So all the disciples and the entourage were all in this structure. So, one of the things about coming to Israel is you never know. Just like then, I just heard that very clearly. And you never know when that's going to be happening. And wherever we are, we stop and receive a transmission. This is actually behind the Western Wall, looking onto the Mount of Olives, and we had a transmission there, just there in the rocks.
And you can see Marilyn is down on the left-hand side in like a purple poncho, I think.
You'll come to recognize that purple poncho.
Yes, you will.
I actually have worn it out, so I need to find a new poncho
go back
for
to
this
Peru
trip.
to get that one.
Yeah, exactly. But this is how it happens: is all of a sudden I will start hearing information, and then we'll sit down and we'll have a transmission. And the cool thing is, like, these rocks are a few thousand years old. And there's nothing in the United States really that's that old besides the rocks. So,
well, the rocks are probably even older than that, but the placement, this is like where they were 2,000 years ago.
Right,
it's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is on the other side. You can see here this large structure on the top of that. This is what's on the opposite side of it, and that's the Western Wall. Or the Wailing Wall, as we would call it.
And it was in 2015 when we were with Lee Carroll that we accidentally got scheduled there on the busiest day of the year. Do you remember that?
Yes, I have a picture of that, actually. And I thought, you can't hardly see anything because there was 3 million, literally 3 million people standing where you see these few people there.
Yeah, in fact, our guide had to have a pole with a flag for us to know where our group was.
Right. But one of the interesting things about the Wailing Wall, or the Western Wall, is in each of those cracks, what you have are hundreds, thousands of little pieces of paper where the Hebrew and us put their prayers into the wall itself. And inside of this wall is where there's the huge structure that's got temple after temple after temple built on top of each other. And the energy is so phenomenal there. You can imagine that all of Israel. I mean, and Israel is, I don't know, the size of New Jersey in the United States. I don't know. It's
small,
really
yeah.
small, and it is truly the energy. I mean, you think that the vortexes in Sedona are strong? They are nothing in compared to Israel. And that's again another picture of me. That is not a transmission from Master Yeshua. Not at all.
This is me proof. Yes, I was in Israel.
Yes. And this is the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, if you're not Christian, you may not know what it was. The first time I went there, the Israelis did not know what the Garden of Gethsemane was. This is where Yeshua, Jesus, prayed before he was taken into custody and then a few days later crucified.
So this was where Judas kissed
Right.
Yeshua, revealing.
And that really happened.
Yeah.
And according to Yeshua, yes, that happened. And this tree here that you're seeing in the foreground, that tree was actually there when Yeshua was there. And I asked, I said, is that tree really that old? And I heard, yes, it is really that old. The whole energy is you can imagine, is, I don't even have a word big enough for the amount of energy that's there. It's beautiful. It's not nearly as floral and ecstatically beautiful.
Or manicured, like
Manicure,
ours. Yeah.
exactly. It's just manicure. That's it. But these are olive trees, and these are, I mean, they've created a path. There used to not be a path there, but it was surrounded by rocks. And the first time I was there in 2014, I was indeed told to go there and find a rock and sit on it. So I was telling all these Israelis, okay, I need to go to the Garden of Gethsemane, find a rock and sit down. And I did. And I walked all around the garden, and it was a sidewalk around the garden, and there was a big rock, and I sat on that rock, and Yeshua came through immediately and announced who he was and spoke for 45 minutes. And that's why always be ready with a recorder because I did not have that one recorded. But in the garden, it's so amazingly significant. This was the rock that I sat on, the rock that was just on the side of this picture. And then I turned around and realized that according to the Christians, and you can see the pretty clear line there of the newer structure and the older structure. I was sitting on the older structure, the darker structure. And this was where the Christians said that Yeshua prayed the night in the Garden of Gethsemane. But I sat on the next rock. And you never really know what's going to happen there. You never really know what's going to happen in Israel. I mean, you will be going along, having fun, laughing, and all of a sudden, like Joy said, you'll reach your hand over and touch something, and a flood of memories will come back to you. And as those memories come back to you, sometimes you could get emotional. Sometimes you could feel the celebration that the disciples had when they were there, or the entourage that traveled with Yeshua. Or sometimes you might burst into tears. And as you do, Yeshua will be there to hold you when that happens, or if that happens. It's very powerful when you feel that close of the energy, I think. And this is a picture of where they told us that they took Yeshua when he was incarcerated. And it really was. And there was a transmission there. Our tour guide asked us to read from a book, and asked me to read from a book. And we read the words, and all of a sudden I remember the words completely disappeared. And there was a spontaneous transmission that Yeshua explained why his death was so dramatic, and why he was tortured, and why it had to happen just that way in order for the prophecies to come true.
I remember that.
Yeah.
That was pretty powerful.
And then you go into a temple and you'll find this theoretically is a shroud, a gown of Mother Mary. I have no idea if it's really a gown of Mother Mary, but it could be. He didn't have anything to say about that.
Maybe that's why that picture is there.
Yes, we decided that, according to Yeshua, that at some point, some Israeli or Jewish tour guide got a hold of Israel and created things that are wonderful to see and experience, but they may or may not be completely accurate. This is one of them. This is a wonderful place, lots of energy, and there's a silver star that, I don't know if you can see that. There's a silver star that the person in front of that star is kneeling down and touching. And theoretically, that is the birthplace of Jesus in Bethlehem in Palestine. And yes, we do go into Palestine, and it is safe. And that is the birthplace. And then after we all stood in line and touched the star.
And they took our picture.
They took our picture.
That might have been the final straw.
Yeah, it was great fun. It was great fun.
Yeah.
But then,
we kind of thought, this is like Disneyland.
Yes. I mean, it was wonderful and it was very spiritual. And this is in the oldest church, the oldest Christian church in Israel. Actually, it's in Palestine. And it was built in 200 A.D., I believe, something like that. And it really is a spectacular structure. However, this is what happened next. Yeshua pulled us all into some private room somewhere and said, okay, so this is what really happened. And there are, once again, catacombs underneath of this church. And we walked into those catacombs, and that's where his mother prepared for the birth. And there were baths there. And then they did go to a structure near there. And it was, I mean, the structure's gone because it was just like a wooden barn. And that's where he really was born. And that's what's happening here. We were not supposed to have a meeting there. We were not supposed to be channeling there. We were not supposed to be doing anything official there. But we were indeed divinely protected throughout our entire journey. And this was one of those times when Yeshua said, okay, come over here. And he had a complete transmission as to why this structure was built, why that particular place was considered holy, and that particular place was considered holy by the Mother Mary after the birth. And so it really is a significant place, but maybe not the one that could be what you might think that it was.
Marilyn, do you remember what time of year we were there?
I think it was in February.
Yeah, that's right. Because judging from the jackets, I know we went 2 different times. That looks more like, because it was colder then, I think.
Yeah, it was in February, March. That's when this one was. And it will be cool in November when we're going again, November 1st of December, when we're going again. It'll be cool. So jackets will be important. And you never know what's going to happen where. I don't know when this was. I don't know where this was taken. But we sat down and we got a transmission. You can see a gate back at the back. I think this was close to Mary's well.
I think so too.
Yeah,
because you were the photos I've seen. I wasn't with you when you went to Mary's well. I stayed back that day. But the photos had that green scarf that you have on.
Right. And this is one of the cathedrals, one of the temples, one of the churches, and they're everywhere. And we do go in several, but this one is a little special simply because it leads to this. And this was really significant for me. This is Elijah's place, the prophet Elijah, who prophesied the coming of Jesus Jeshua. And this was where he created his messages, his prophecy. And it is an actual place, and it is true what happened there. And we actually, when we went there, there's a video of a transmission, and it's on our website to see. This is Elijah's area where Elijah was. We also go to the desert, and the desert, you just can't imagine, or it may be difficult for you to imagine the expansiveness of the desert in such a small country, because you go from Jerusalem, plush, fields, trees, and all of a sudden it's like you turn the corner and then you have this.
Yeah, well, Israel is pretty much a desert, but they've been really good about turning the salt water of the Mediterranean into water that they could actually use to garden with.
And there's some pretty significant...
To irrigate with.
Right. And there's some significant things that happen in the desert there.
Yeah.
This is just to give you a little bit of an indication as to the size. You see the person taking a picture, and then all of the rest of that is desert.
Very desolate. Oh, I love this story.
This fellow, I don't know his name. We were out here in the desert, and all of a sudden I was nudged several times before I actually took action to go and take this selfie with this fellow. This was one of those times when the whole group was going one way and Marilyn's off going somewhere else, and to take a picture, a selfie, with this particular fellow. And after I did, I remember thinking, what was that about? And he did not speak English. And so he was probably thinking, what is that about? and we found out later why that happened. But this is in the desert. We were up in the mountainous desert at the time. And to walk away from the group and take a picture, this was in 2015.
He was in the group.
He was in the group.
But there were 300 people.
But there were 300 people in the group. And he was in the group. And I had never really, I don't remember whether I had seen him or paid much attention to him, except up in the desert, I was definitely nudged, pushed. They were very adamant to go and take his picture. And so I did. And I'll tell you a little bit later what happens. This is going down into the monastery that was built into the cliff.
Yeah, that has an amazing story, too.
This is the monastery in the cliff.
And it's a pretty good hike, but you can take a donkey as well.
Yes.
They do.
And if you want to know what it's like to ride a donkey,
watch our outtakes.
Watch our outtakes. Riding a donkey is like this. This is a part of that temple, that monastery. But this is where something significant happened. You want to share that?
Yeah. Now, I don't remember the exact story, but I can tell you the outcome. So this was where, I don't remember if it was a group of monks or there was more than one.
It was a Benedictine monastery.
Yeah. Okay. So this is where one monk in particular was meditating and was at that point of his journey of overcoming physical matter.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be able to put his hand through the rock. And sure enough, in the rock, there is a handprint in the rock, solid granite. I mean, it is not sandstone. It's not a soft rock. It is very, very solid rock. And the handprint is right there in it.
That was pretty significant. And so, needless to say, this was the place where we stopped for a silent meditation as we sat in the Benedictine monastery and really spent just a few moments of sacred silence and stillness. And none of this was planned. However, all of our group showed up there at the same time. It It was amazing.
And everyone just sat down and started meditating. I mean, there were no directions to do that.
No.
It was just again, energetically, you're just kind of guided as to what to do.
Right. It's very cool. Very cool. And this was outside of that monastery after we rode the donkeys back up the hill.
And you can see Marilyn's got a transistor on. And this is part of what we do when we're in group like this is she will channel, or as she says, she will transmit. And we have a headpiece. And so that way you can be pretty much anywhere within reason and still hear the channeling. And also that way we don't get kicked out of public areas for channeling, because they don't always like there to be religious messages happening in these very public places, even though we don't consider this a religious message, but it is what we would call a transmission.
Well, and it's interesting.
And it's private. It's personal.
It is private. It's personal. And that way you've got this little headset on and you're listening to it, and you may be, 100 feet away from where we are talking. And that's also really nice if you are walking along the group or walking along somewhere and you may get separated from the group. As long as you can hear our guide through your headset, then you're fine. You're at least 500 feet from him.
And we don't want to scare you. We've never lost anybody.
No, we've never lost anyone. But it's really nice because we find these really private places where there are no tourists except our group.
Yeah.
And we bring in the transmission and they talk about what's happening in that area. And in the same area,
sometimes trees talk to you and they say, I want a hug. And this was just a very special time for me in that same area that we were in. Just again, energetically, you can just feel the sacredness of all of these places that you visit.
So powerful.
This one
just, I don't know, what can we say?
I didn't even know what Masada was.
I didn't either.
There were places on the itinerary. I tend not to look at the itinerary until I'm at the hotel in the country that we're in.
Yeah.
We both are not really good about that. We just trust that the tour guide has, put it together for our group. But this was one of those times I knew we were headed to the Dead Sea. And I was excited about that because of the mud from the Dead Sea. It's really good for your skin. And we were going to this spa, and we were going to stop at a couple places along the way that I really didn't know that much about. Now, this was a big one of the three things I learned from being in the Holy Land. One, I told you, was I didn't realize how small geographically everything was. This is like within a day's drive of Jerusalem, way out in the desert. But I was not familiar with the story of Masada, and it was getting there. I still wasn't familiar with the story. I was learning it from the guide and from reading the plaques on the wall in the museum. But once you get to Masada is, again, I am not going to be historically accurate, but it was a long time ago, before Yeshua, and you can see to the right there's like a kind of an incline coming up to the right hand side, like a ramp, yeah. And later we learned that Masada was King Herod, I think King Herod's temple that he had built if he ever needed to escape, and he had olives and herbs and oils and
birds,
everything there in storage for 500 years. I mean, like a long time, like more than you would even be thinking that it would be. And we're not talking one lifetime, we're talking about many lifetimes for most people, was stored in this place. And when the Romans came in and drove the Jews out of Jerusalem, some of them knew about this place and escaped here. Now, it wasn't very many. It was like a couple hundred. It wasn't very many. But they ended up at Masada, families, men, women, children, and some of the Essenes as well. There's a great book called The Dove Keeper that is historically accurate. It is a fiction book, but it's really great about this, that will help you understand if you're interested in this. Marilyn and I were both so deeply touched. We really did not take many photos when we were there because we were just so blown away at the story that several hundred Jews ended up here on this mountaintop, and the Romans decided, we're going to go get them. We'll send a few soldiers out there to go get them. Well, they went to get them, and it turned out that they couldn't. And they thought, we'll just send. They
couldn't get up to the mountain.
This will just take a couple of weeks. We'll just send a few Roman soldiers. We'll have all of those people off that mountaintop. What was it, like 3 years later, and 10,000 Roman soldiers, and I hope I'm getting this right.
And there was the Jewish slaves.
Yeah, so what they did was that ramp, they couldn't get them down off of this mountain. So then they went and they got Jewish slaves. So imagine
Hebrew
this.
Slaves.
You're Jewish,
Hebrew.
You're on Masada, and you're watching your own people. I think it took a year or
3 years to build the ramp.
They built this ramp so the Roman soldiers could come and get them. And they did eventually get them, but the story is just of how they survived.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. And it's amazing the energy. There's birds up there that are nowhere else in Israel because those were the birds that Herod had raised. And this is looking out from one of the caves on that structure.
There's caves in this area. This was another one of the things I learned when I was there. There's caves throughout the desert, and many of the Essenes lived and hid in the caves during these times and during the times of Yeshua. And I didn't know that. And this is what happens. You're driving along in the bus, and all of a sudden, you just find yourself staring. You're so drawn towards something. Like for me, it was the caves. Like I kept thinking, those are caves, and I just kept feeling this energy. And then we ended up in Qumran, which is where the Essenes were. I didn't know anything about any of this. I mean, this was all news to me, but I'm a graphic designer. I'm an artist. I happened to be in Qumran in the cave where the Essenes were scribes that were creating all of these scrolls.
These are the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah, and I was sitting there.
That they found in the 50s in our lifetime.
I was sitting there next to Deb DeLisi, who's also a graphic designer and an amazing artist. She did all of Dr. Todd's Peniel Tone's artwork. And we both got this chill at the same time and looked at each other and went, I've been here before.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that happens, as Adironnda says, when you pick up aspects of your soul and you go on trips like these.
Absolutely. It's so amazing. And then you come back to the tourist area. This supposedly is the Gospel Trail.
You know what I just realized?
What?
It was 2014. I was just going through a series of drawings that I had started during our journey together, in the last 14 years. And it was 2015 that I was there. And that's when those drawings started.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that interesting? I didn't realize that until just now.
That is interesting. This is another area where, we had a spontaneous channeling. You never know where it is, when it is. I mean, if you're going, you want to kind of hang out with the group a little bit because you never know what's going to happen. And it's pretty significant when it does.
And one reason you see Marilyn in a shawl or her shoulders covered is because we go in and out of temples, and you don't have to wear like a dress or anything, but you carry these shawls with you so that you can wrap it around and make a skirt out of it or cover
your head.
Cover your head.
The women have to cover their heads when they go in a temple.
Right.
And it's always just a nice thing to have. And you never know when you're walking around and you see a structure like this and you think, well, what is that? Well, this was recently discovered in a city, I think it was in Tel Aviv, that there is a temple that they've recently discovered. This is the gateway to the temple. And so the temple is back underneath all of the dirt, and they've recently discovered that. And so we walked around the corner, sat down on the steps.
Boom.
Boom, had a transmission there, and let Yeshua tell us exactly what that temple was for and when it was, and why they're just now discovering it. And this, you can see down at the bottom, there's several people in white robes. When we were there last time, several of the major temples, at least 3 times, there was a whole group of like 30 priests from Chile that were in the same structures that we were in. Here, they're singing or doing the sacraments or something, and they do that in several temples. And the universe arranged, when we were at the Mount of the Beatitudes, for me, once again, to get separated from the group. And there was like a big van that people rode back and forth from the parking lot to the temple. And somehow I got separated from the group, and I was in the van with all of these priests. So they were asking me, some of them spoke English, and they were asking me what I was doing there. And so they actually received information about how Yeshua is reborn, resurrected in their hearts, and there was an activation that occurred with these 30 priests from Chile. And then, of course, in any temple, you never know. This is joy.
This is a moment. This is what happens to you, is you just, you'll find yourself somewhere and you're overjoyed, or you're overtaken with grief, or you're overtaken with such love that you just take a moment. And it is a very special place.
It absolutely is.
This is one of our favorite stories.
Here we were this was one of
Shepherd's Park or something.
I'm not sure what it was called, but this is a tip: match your pictures with a journal while you're on the road there, so you know what you're looking at. Our group was there sitting down, and they were receiving a transmission from Yeshua and Mother Mary. They spoke not simultaneously, but one and then the other. And when Yeshua was speaking, this bus of Christians,
a tour bus,
came in.
Probably 60.
And they were walking through in between our group. I mean, it was obvious that I was standing in front of the group and they were listening, which was interesting, that they would just walk through our group on past, and they say, well, we're looking for Jesus. We're looking for Jesus. And they walked
I'm
through,
like, he's right here.
and then they walked back. We're looking for Jesus. And Yeshua would nod to them and speak to them and say hello and like activate them. It was so fun.
Yeah. This is the R&R day.
The R&R day. We actually have a spa day at the Dead Sea. This is the Dead Sea. You'll notice that this person is on their stomach because you can't hardly dive down, because the Dead Sea.
This person's covered in Dead Sea mud.
That is not ash. That is Dead Sea mud. And the Dead Sea mud is very, very good for your skin. And we have a spa day at the Dead Sea.
It's really fun.
And then this is the Mount of the Beatitudes. And the Mount of the Beatitudes is pretty spectacular. We did it in 2015, again in 2017, and then again in 2000. We will go this time too. And have a transmission. That's where, if you're not familiar with it, that's where Jesus spoke to the crowd of 10,000. And it's really special. And as soon as we finished speaking, someone took a picture of someone sitting in the crowd, and this is the picture that they got. And I think they were probably taking a picture of the guy up there in the yellow shirt, but this was what they got, which we're saying was either Yeshua or the Mother Mary.
Yeah, that still blows me away.
It does. And this is a boat that we take out on the Sea of Galilee. And I should have put that picture back in. You remember the selfie that I took with the fellow in the desert?
Yeah.
while
You
we
didn't
were,
tell them who he was,
no,
did you?
no. While we were on this boat,
Days later.
days later, I mean, we were on this boat, and I was giving a transmission, and then we were kind of relaxing and playing around and not really doing anything after the transmission. And all of a sudden, I saw this fellow again, and he was weeping, and he just had tears in his eyes, and I was in channel. I walked over to him and took his hands and held his hands, and Yeshua then looked right into his heart and said, I just want you to know who you are. You are the reincarnated Simon Peter. And, well, then he really burst into tears. But to have Yeshua, I mean, you can tell when Yeshua is present through me, but to have Yeshua, I mean, Simon Peter was the disciple that denied Jesus 3 times after his death, and that did happen. And that was the instance that when he was realized who he was, that it was just a really significant moment, as there are so many significant moments there. This is one of them.
Yes.
We go into the River Jordan, and we call it a baptism.
An anointment.
Yeshua calls it an anointment.
Yes.
And he anoints each person and brings them a message and for their soul from Yeshua that really only they can hear. And it's very significant, and it was a beautiful experience. And then we did this with another person, Elon. This is Elon here. And it was one of those experiences that you simply never, ever forget. It was really significant. And then after that, we went to a Bedouin camp, and Elon thought, you want what? And we said, we want some kind of juice, and we want some kind of cracker or something. And Elon is an Israeli. So I don't know that he knew quite what we were asking, but we did, because Yeshua wanted to then have a communion. And one of the most significant moments during the trip for me that I learned is that Yeshua didn't necessarily say, do this in remembrance of me. This is my body. This is my blood. What he said, and you can see it in this picture, which is one of my favorites, is where Joy is having communion with one of our attendees, and he asked them to pass along, please remember the Christ, the love of Christ is within you.
Yeah.
And this is a ritual that you can do to remember that.
That was really special. That was really special because we weren't in a temple.
No.
We were in a Bedouin camp. We were sleeping on the ground. You do not have to, but we did sleep on the ground.
And we're not going to sleep on the ground this trip.
Yeah. So it was almost like you didn't have to be in a temple to experience that.
Exactly. And that, very significant.
This is Adironnda having ice cream.
You can tell the difference between Marilyn and Adironnda in this picture. Adironnda does love ice cream. And so does Marilyn. And, something happens when you see the Mediterranean Sea.
This is the end of our trip, actually.
Yeah.
We end up in Tel Aviv, which is a modern city, after having traveled the sacred Holy Land, which is very, very old for, many, many days. And then we end up in a nice 5-star hotel by Israeli standards in Tel Aviv, right on the water, and the sea is just so, it's like bath water. It's
beautiful.
wonderful. Yeah, it's a great way to wrap up the trip.
And that's us.
A little tired.
A little tired by the Mediterranean
A little bedraggled.
Sea.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we do love to have you travel with us. And we will keep you safe. And it will be an experience, really, of a lifetime.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we just wanted to really share with everybody is, first of all, yes, we do still have room.
Yes.
For a few people on this trip, and it is a safe place to go. I know the first time we went, we were a little concerned. If you watch the news, you hear all kinds of things, but we were safe the entire time we were there, and the food was amazing. You've never had hummus until you've had it from Israel, or pita bread. It was such a great trip, and we're in a window of time now that there's still time to book your airfare. You can still join us. You will need your passport to go.
It's one of those experiences that, I mean, this will make my 4th trip to Israel. And I don't know if we'll go again. We just, depending on what we're nudged to do. But it's really one of those experiences that from all over the world, according to Yeshua, this is one of the places where it all started. That the 12 tribes, they did come out from that land and moved into other areas. The energy of Israel is like no other energy that you could ever imagine. And our attendees, I mean, we could give you story after story after story. So our trip is November 22nd through December 6th. And so if you ever didn't want to make a Thanksgiving dinner for your family, if you live in the United States, this is your chance because it's before Thanksgiving. And so it's a 2-week trip, and it's a wonderful experience. And who knows what will happen this time. So the 3 things that we learned.
Oh my gosh.
I think we covered
way more than 3 things.
Way more than 3 things.
And something that we didn't talk about before we started, we may have to cut this part out, is were we going to have a message from Adironnda or from Yeshua?
We didn't talk about that before we started.
I'm putting her on the spot.
I don't know.
We have a few minutes left.
Let me see.
I know Yeshua's been talking to us along the way.
Dearly beloveds, my dearest beloved friends, yes, these 2 bring you to my land for peace. For peace. These 2 links that connect you to my holy land. There is no accident that you are coming this year. There is no accident that we are talking to you about it now. For I will be tapping some of you who are watching this to transport with us to Israel. For then the energy of this planet can indeed shift into the peace-filled place that it was destined to shift. I have been reborn, resurrected as you call it, into your heart. And I am speaking to you. The sacred sites, the holy places of my homeland, they are truly holy because you will be there. When I lived, and many of you walked with me, when I lived, when you walk on that ground now, you will indeed feel the footsteps of yourself. You will retrieve that part of yourself that may be punishing yourself because of guilt, because of something you believed that you did or did not do. I am here to tell you, my life when I was walking the earth was for you. Now, it was completely orchestrated to remind you of who you are. You have said that I did miracles. The miracle of turning water into wine, the miracle of healing, the miracle of this. The reason I came to this beloved earth in human form was to remind you that you and I are the same. You and I are one. And the only reason you're not performing those same miracles is because you don't believe in yourself, as I do. Please, let us walk together. I am you, and you are me. Love, only love, leads our path. Toda, toda, toda. Kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. Adonai Savaot.
See what I mean? Spontaneous channels, spontaneous transmission.
And with Adironnda, I'm on the outside. Yeshua pulls me inside. So I feel all that unconditional, that infinite love. It's just like, whoa.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us for a walk in the Holy Land and a little insight on what it's like to go to Israel and to the sacred spots in Israel. And whether or not you join us this year, we're grateful that you've been here with us for this particular message. And if you decide to join us, there's a link somewhere around this video that you can click to find out more information. And we'd love to see you in Israel.
Namaste, y'all.
Namaste.